Hello everybody, this is the second lecture for climate change and today we're going to cover LOB. We're going to look at the consequences of excessive greenhouse gas emissions on our environment as well as our living organisms. Okay, one of the first major consequence of excessive greenhouse emissions and global warming is the melting of our polar ice caps. Okay, polar ice caps refers to all the land ice and sea ice that are located at our poles. All right, so there's evidence that our Arctic pole glaciers and ice caps have been in decline. Now, glaciers are something a little bit different. I will tell you more about glaciers later on. Okay, so there's evidence that our Arctic glaciers and ice caps have been in decline. In September 1984, NASA satellite images shows the size of our Arctic ice cap is this big, and in September 2016, the size has evidently shrunk. And recent studies of our glaciers in the Alaska has also indicated an accelerated rate of melting. Furthermore, local warming over Greenland is likely to be thrice the global average and can eventually lead to a virtual complete melting, leading to a sea level rise of about 7 meters. This is indeed very scary. Now, the melting of polar ice caps is an example of positive feedback in global warming. What is positive feedback? It is a process that occurs in a feedback loop which exacerbates the effects of a small disturbance. So it is a case whereby A will produce more of B, which will in turn produce more of A. So the melting of polar ice caps will cause a positive feedback in global warming. What do I mean? You see, global warming will cause our ice to melt. And when there is less ice remaining on the surface of our planet, there's less reflective surface to reflect the solar radiation back into space. So this will lead to increased global temperatures, meaning this will lead to an increase in global warming. Thereby, the melting of polar ice caps causes the positive feedback in global warming. Now, so this has an after effect, and that is the rising of sea levels. Okay, as all of that land ice melts, okay, they will go into the sea. And as water expands and take up more space in ice, shallow coastal regions especially will be flooded. Okay, there'll be increased risk of flooding. This may increase salinity of bays and estuaries and possibly upset ecosystems. Okay, because seawater, alright, has a lot of salt in it. So seawater is high in salinity, right? So with excessive flooding of shallow coastal regions by seawater, there'll be increase in salinity of bays and estuaries. Okay. Coastal lowlands and delta ecosystems will also be affected. Right, for instance, wetlands will be forced further inland, okay, because of the flooding of coastal regions, and the incidence of coastal floods will increase. Okay, and if you're wondering what are estuaries and bays and deltas, okay, so I'm going to pause here to explain to you. So this here, what you see here is an estuary. Okay, it is a partly enclosed body of water along the coast where one or more streams of the river enter and mix with fresh water and seawater. So at an estuary, this is basically where the river meets the ocean, and in this region there is a mix of fresh water and seawater. Okay, then what's a bay? This is a bay. It is a body of water partially enclosed by land that is directly open or connected to the ocean. Alright, so all these things is just for your further knowledge so that the content that you are learning for climate change will make a bit more sense for you. Okay, and what is a delta? Okay, a delta is when is an area whereby sediments accumulate in at the mouth of the river. So a delta is a landform created by the deposition of sediments that is carried by a river as the flow of it leaves its mouth and enter a slower moving or stagnant water. Okay, so deltas may form at estuaries. Okay, so where all these sediments accumulate at estuaries, then this formation is now called a delta. Okay, all right. So the rising of sea level is not a problem unique to other coastal regions. Okay, we Singapore, being an island country, is also facing the imminent danger of rising sea level, and we are already starting to prepare for it. So, for instance, there's this expressway called Nicole Drive along the coast of Changi. Okay, we have already begun works to elevate the height of this expressway. Okay, because it's just right next to the sea. Now, the next effect of increased greenhouse emissions is the melting of permafrost. And before I go on further, I have to explain to you what is latitude and altitude. Okay, now latitude is the angular distance of a place north or south from the Earth's equator. Okay, and I will let you know later that permafrost, most of it is found in our northern latitudes. Okay, so latitude is the angular distance of a place north or south from the equator. Please do not mix this up with altitude. Altitude is the height of an object or a point in relation to the sea level. Okay, so please do not confuse latitude with altitude. So, as I said earlier, permafrost is found mainly in regions of high latitudes. So, in our northern atmosphere, especially. Okay, so and what is permafrost? Permafrost is permanently frozen soil, and 24% of our land in the northern hemisphere is actually comprised of permafrost, which stores massive amounts of carbon. And so when temperatures rise due to global warming, okay, because of the excessive greenhouse effect, permafrost is at risk of melting. This means the organic matter that is found within the permafrost will decompose, releasing the stored carbon in the form of carbon dioxide and methane. Now, the melting of permafrost has also other bad consequences. It can also cause land erosion, the disappearance of lakes, landslides, and ground subsidence. It can also cause changes in plant species composition at high latitudes, alright, because of the organic matter and the nutrients that it contains. So it can also potentially disrupt ecosystems. Now, peat is made up of dead organic material. It is also rich in carbon. It consists of 90% of water and 10% of plant matter. It is also mostly found at high latitudes of the northern hemisphere, both at the surface and below. Okay, but peat is also actually very common in tropical lands as well. Alright. For instance, the soil in Indonesia is largely made up of peat as well, containing a lot of dead organic material rich in carbon. So that is why when forest fires happen in Indonesia, it's quite difficult to extinguish them because the peat in those forested areas are the ones that are burning. They're very rich in carbon, so they burn very well, and it's very difficult to extinguish peat fires. Okay, nonetheless, peat is mostly found at the high latitudes of our northern hemisphere. They can be found at both on the surface or below, and some of this peat is actually found underneath the permafrost layer. So the melting of permafrost will also release the carbon stored of the peat. Okay, and a study found that just simply the 1 degree Celsius warming of the earth over the next few decades could lead to 38 to 100 million tons of carbon released per year from peat alone.